And then Bob was Everyone's like, what's going on? So it's good to be with you guys again. It's been a while for me. Like my man said, my name is Mina, and I went to school here at NYT. It was actually funny, like 5 minutes ago, there was a professor that was lecturing that we had named Dr. Kelly. I don't know if anybody of you guys had him. He was one of the very prominent atheist professors that we always enjoyed spending time with. That might have a tie-in for us later on for this talk, but he's not the main competition. Just wanted to show you, like, I kind of know my way around for what that's worth. So today's topic of conversation, I don't know if you guys have Bibles, but we're probably going to need them to dig in a little bit. As a setup, I wanted to kind of ask you a general question. If you kind of ever felt this particular way that I've been feeling from time to time. You ever feel as someone who's like an Orthodox Christian, go to church, you do your thing, you kind of have like really great experiences sometimes, you kind of have maybe a retreat where you kind of have maybe a couple of great OCC talks, you have someone like Abuna Musa come in or someone like Abuna Luke or whatever, and then you're like, things are going really great, and then things get really mundane, like just boring as heck, or like school just kind of starts getting the best of you. You're just like, oh man, bio this, and calc that, and things just kind of they're not stimulating anymore. Like, does something lose the spark a little bit in your Christianity? Does that ever happen to anybody in this room? If not, just let me know it's just me, then I'll just leave, I don't care. It's only a short 3-hour drive back to Sounds in the middle of the desolation that is Hurricane Sandy. But if you have, maybe then we're in luck, because there's a group of people that we're going to study for today that's had the same exact kind of feeling. We're going to look at 3 different pieces from the Gospels, the Synoptic Gospels. Those guys being the disciples. We know the disciples had some exciting stuff go down in their life. We're going to look at one particular chapter where they just got off like some great stuff going down. They fed 5,000 people. Is that average? Like, when was the last time anybody here did that before? So you went around like just fed 5,000 people? Let me know if you have, because I'm hungry still. This is not that much. If it didn't happen to you, like, maybe, I'm just kidding, it was good, it was great. Probably not the best. If you haven't had that kind of high, maybe you had a similar, smaller level kind of high, okay? But they fed 5,000 people, great stuff. And then Jesus also sent them out, and he said, all right, go cure people. Like some of you guys here want to be doctors. Imagine not even having to go through the process of the H&P. I have to go to the admissions, not have to go to the ER, none of that stuff. They just walked around like, bing, bing, cure, 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 cure. Great stuff. Then Jesus was offering something. This is where we're going to pick up our story. From Luke 9. You have phones that are versatile. Because we're going to look at the story in 3 parts of the Gospels. Just so that we can kind of remember. There's Luke 9, Mark 9, and then Matthew 17. Matthew's might be hard to remember at least. Luke and Mark, same chapter, same story. But we're going to look from verse 28. So as we said so far, the stage, stuff going down, whatever. Then St. Luke begins for us the story and says, now it came to pass about 8 days after these things, some of these things were, there's a lot of great stuff, great things. He took Peter, James, and John and went up on the mountain to pray. We're going to pause here for a quick second. This may not be the exact thing that they would have expected. All right, Jesus, like, what's going to be the next exciting thing we're going to do? Like, I know I was talking with, some of these guys here earlier saying, okay, there's going to be an OCC plan of we're going to try to do like hurricane relief or something, or maybe you're going to try to do something, some other lecture. Maybe there's some new speaker. I know you're running out of speakers to bring because it's the same set from year in, year out, right? What's going to be the next thing, Jesus? What's going to be like, what's going to make us excited again about hanging out with you? Because otherwise, the same Papa John's. Why come here? Why come here every week? If I ask you individually yourself, why come here every week? Maybe pause for a second. And I think the disciples kind of asked the same question of like, because Jesus invited them to something so ordinary. He's like, all right, guys, check it out. Let's go pray. And they were like maybe, if it's a room full of us, say we're the 12 or the 15 disciples, Jesus goes to all of them and says, all right, guys, hey, look, we're going to go to the mountain and pray. Who's up to come? You want to come? Sure, Andrew, Bartholomew, like the rest of them are like, we can pray right here. This is fine. Why take mountains generally? Take a lot of climbing and stuff. We're okay. Like if I said to you, all right, next week's OCC meeting, instead of being in whatever room this is, we're gonna go up to ascend to the roof of nightclub or something. It's like, all right, record it. Maybe send me the link. What am I gonna do that for? What we're seeing here is Jesus kind of offering an invitation. And then we are always seeing these three names, right? These three names come from the Gospels a lot, of guys that are just hungrier than the rest of the disciples, for whatever reason. It's the same three that come with him there, the same three that you're going to see in the Garden of Gethsemane, the same three that basically are there at very critical times and become leaders in the church. The rest of the 12 are really great too. The rest of the 12 do really great stuff. But there's something special about the three there, and it wasn't because of just how amazing they were individually, but it was simply because of the way they responded to an invitation. Our first principle that we want to look at for ourselves. When you ask yourself, how hungry are you when it comes to your spiritual life, when it comes to living with Christ? How badly do you want it? St. John Chrysostom one time said, we get as much from Christ as we're able to bear. It's say if you're really hungry, okay? And we were offering unlimited Papa John's, unending Papa John's pizza. Somebody shows up with a little plate, little one of these guys, puts their hand up. What's the most you can put in that little plate? Say if you're really pushing it and you're really gonna be Egyptian about it. What's the most you can put? 2 pies? Okay. That'd be an interesting, different engineering. Say if you could do that. Mesh, even if you could do that. 2 pies in that little tiny plate. What if someone else shows up in a nice pickup truck of Papa John's pizza? Maybe they'd be able to put more than 2 pies at that point. An important thing for us to understand as a beginning point is we get as much from God as we show up to receive. And sometimes I think because, we're going to explain this a little bit more with the rest of the passage, but because we're only expecting to receive a little bit, the most I can possibly receive is 1 slice, so why bother showing up with more than 1 little plate? And practically speaking, what the thing is what the container is that you bring, what the plate or the pickup truck or whatever it is that you bring in your spiritual life, at a very, very practical level, is oftentimes the amount of investment you put into your spiritual life. Sometimes we get really surprised at ourselves, right? I'm really surprised, how come my spiritual life is really weak? I know I'm reading the Bible, I'm reading 8 words per day, it's putting in that 75 seconds. How come my life is so weak? And then God looks at us, he's like, it's not that surprising to me. I don't know where the mystery is. This is not Calc 5. This is pretty simple stuff. It's still standard of me saying, you come in with you dig a hole, I'll fill it for you. You bring something that I can fill, and I'll fill for you. But it's hard for God, I think, to fill up our own spiritual life when we're bringing him something very, very small. And the reason why God wanted to have something special with these 3 is, again, not just for the 3 themselves. And something that you guys have to understand as well for yourselves, in your spiritual life too, is that God is often doing something in your life, not just so you can have something for yourself. Sometimes when God is inviting you to a special revelation, to give you something special about himself, can you imagine how this impacted the dynamic of the 12? How he took 3 to push them further, take them on a higher plateau, on a higher mountain, reveal more about himself, and then make the 12 more like me. You know what I'm saying? I even overheard somebody here talking about I'm studying when I can, but I see her studying more, right? So I'm not gonna mention names or point any fingers. I'm just just saying. So when I see her studying more, it makes me want to study more. Does that ever happen? Besides what I, spied on?
Never happened.
Never. The night was this dying day. Same thing in the spiritual life. Sometimes God wants to use us to push other people around us. Because we're always by nature looking to each other. And one of the problems that happens is we're looking to each other, we're all maintaining the same level of spiritual life. But every once in a while, God's inviting you to be one of the three. Like what he showed, what he's about to show. And I don't know if you know where the story is going here. This is the Transfiguration. This is a big deal type story. He didn't show this to a multitude of people. He didn't show this to 70 amazing, amazing disciples. He didn't show this to 9 other really great apostles. He showed it to 3 people out of an invitation. Let's keep reading. So in 29, it says, as he prayed, the appearance of his face was altered. His robe became white and glistening. And behold, 2 men talked with him who were Moses and Elijah, who appeared in glory and spoke of his decease, which he was about to accomplish at Jerusalem. But Peter and those with him were heavy with sleep, and when they were fully awake and saw his glory and the 2 men who stood with him, then it happened as they were parting from him, that Peter said to Jesus, Master, it is good for us to be here. Let us make 3 tabernacles, one for you, one for Moses, one for Elijah, not knowing what he said. While he was saying this, a cloud came and overshadowed them, and they were fearful as they entered the cloud. And a voice came out of the cloud saying, This is my beloved Son, hear him. When the voice had ceased, Jesus was found alone, but they kept quiet and told no one in those days any of these things that they had seen. Have you heard the story before, essentially? It's one of the big feast days in the church that we always make a big deal out of. We figured, hey, we're in between feasts. We got some time to talk about everything. One of the big things about this story, I'd have to ask you, so what happened? Like, if you think for yourself for a second, what was the point of this? Like, does this seem like the most random thing ever? So here's Jesus. Like, is it a big deal for Jesus to come and say, hey, look, my clothes are really white? Like one other author, in, say Mark comments on it in his gospel and says, like, such as no launder on earth, like no little Asian laundry person can make the clothes that way. Wow, impressive. He's Jesus. Like, what's the big deal? His clothes are white. In the other gospel, it says, okay, wow, like his face was glistening. What we see here, his face was glistening. What's the big deal? I know you may not necessarily answer it out loud, but at least let's think together for a second. If Jesus was just trying to show like a really, really cool magic trick, why show a really cool magic to 3 people, first of all? Why do it in this fashion? Unless, what if it's not a really cool trick? What if something is happening here that's not just an event? You know, sometimes when we read the events of the life of Jesus, we say to ourselves, well, you know, hey, today, this week at church, we're going to celebrate the week of Temptation Sunday. And this week at church, we're going to celebrate and commemorate this day, this random Thursday in the life of Christ, and then this Wednesday in the life of Christ, and when Christ did this and when Christ did that. Let me ask you, what are we actually doing when we're thinking about times in the life of Jesus? Have you ever thought about that? Both in church and both in your own life. Is it kind of like, is it like birthdays? Is it like, you know, like, oh, like back in, like for me, my birthday's coming up, so it's going to be really cool to think about the time when I came out of the womb. It was dark, scary, like now I'm a baby, wow, it's great. Is that what we're doing in the life of Christ? Typically, that's what I think, to be honest with you. So I typically think we're looking back at a historical event and then saying, oh, that was a great event, hey, like, wow, let's talk about it and do a sermon about it. But the cool thing that I wanted to share with you about this particular thing is that Jesus wanted to accomplish 2 things, at least, in this occurrence. One was to actually transfigure his perception, or like change the way they thought of him, these 3 specifically, to be able to build them with the rest of the Torah. Let me give you an example. I use this side of the room as one example. Let's use this side of the room. So these 2 guys, this is Dave and John. Dave is a medical student. John's a doctor. They can look at each other, like Dave looks at John and says, wow, like, you know, he's a doctor, it's pretty cool. When he's seeing each other here in this setting, he's drinking coffee, he's chilling, like, nothing fancy, okay? But there was one particular night, recently, when Dave happens to shadow John in the hospital. Sees him running around, pointing interns, like, you go get the coffee, go get the water, you know what I mean? Like, you know, rub my feet, like, that's what doctors do for interns. Quickly. You know? At that point, that's a transfiguration moment for these two in their relationship. That's when Dave was just like, whoa, that's what doctors do. What was that face? Like, I want to do that. And specifically even for their relationship is because John, is showing Dave what you can one day do. You can one day also order interns around like they are your slave. That's just what comes with the territory. Just kidding.
Really?
I mean, no, I should tell true. In that sense, Jesus wasn't just showing them, hey, I can do cool stuff. He was showing them, this is not just my divinity. You know, sometimes when we look at this transfiguration thing, when Jesus' actual appearance is different, we look at him and say, wow, he's showing us who God looks like. He actually wasn't doing it. This is an important point I want you to try to catch. He's showing us what humans are. Like a true human looks like what Jesus showed us on that mountain of transfiguration. And he's saying to us, I know you were used to the whole dust thing. I know you were used to life under Adam. I know you were used to whatever you thought was a human, whatever you thought was normal. I know you thought being a human means weakness and being in this and sin and all that stuff. That's not what it means to be human. Trust me, let me show you. This is true humanity. You're going to get to it one day, but I'm giving you a sneak peek and you can begin to even taste it now. In one commentary, one of the contemporary church guys was talking about how you look at places like St. Anthony's Monastery, or other places where holiness is normal, you know? You have people there who are talking to each other about oh, you know, I just saw this saint, you know, he was here, he visited us. You know, someone here was sick, you know, they had terminal cancer, but they got cured. And for them, it's not really a big deal. He's saying it's the weather. It's in other news, it's Thursday. It's not it's not mind-blowing to them because holiness to them, and they've begun to see what life looks like as a glorified human being. Even though they're not fully there, even though they're not you know how one of the things that we believe is that after we die, in the resurrection, we get the full glory of our humanity, right? We get the glorified body. I don't know if you've heard about that before. That's cool stuff. And sometimes just looking that far away is not enough for me and you as a Christian. It's what part of that can I start to have now? And what Jesus introduces to us is the possibility even of a human being having this kind of even physical appearance. And now think back to all the stories of the saints that you hear, you know, this saint's hands lighting up, or this saint dripping oil, or this saint doing that or doing this. All these things make sense because of Jesus here opening up the fact that you can begin to taste the life after death now. What difference does that make? Let's break it down practically. Practically, if you think about your own spiritual life today, and you think about what am I shooting for? What am I pushing for? What's my ceiling? What am I trying to do? I had someone text me the other day, really simple question. They were like, hey man, you know, tell me the meaning of life. I'm what do I look like? I ain't Dr. Phil. You know, when you think about big questions in your own life, when you think about things that motivate you, what's pushing you forward? If the ceiling for us, if we lower the ceiling so much for ourselves, I don't know how high your ceiling is, but picture your ceiling. What's the wildest potential in your personal spiritual life? When you think about it, on a great day, you just prayed liturgy, and you read the Bible, and you fed a homeless guy, and everything's going great. What's your wildest spiritual imagination? Is there a wildest spiritual imagination for you? Or is everything for us just just chill? We just do what we do. We come to OCC, we Papa John's it, and call it a day. Is there anything more? What Christ is inviting us to is idea of more. And not just more metaphorically. I'll tell you for me, how this impacts me when I read the story, but when I realize this truth behind what the church is teaching us. It makes me dig deeper into the Bible. You know, you can read the Bible, again, going back to the food analogy. You ever seen someone eat that's just like a skinny chick on a diet? You know, just one of these kind of thing. Sorry for making fun of skinny chicks. Like, you know what I mean? Like, very, like, small. Or, like, maybe, like, fancy British people. Like, they have, like... Versus, have you ever seen, like, a starving Egyptian guy? Like, you know what I mean? Like, who would just go up to food and eat the table? You know what I mean? Eat, like, the things around the food. Maybe, like, this kid. Like... Ask yourself maybe how you're approaching even the basics. How you're approaching the Bible. Are you approaching the Bible like, you know, the whipped cream on top of cake? Oh, it's delicious. Or you're approaching it like a hungry, like starving madman, mad woman who's really digging. For me, beyond the Bible too, is digging into truth. Like, what truth is there in the church? Like, every once in a while, I'll come across a new truth. New things that I thought I understood, and someone blows my mind with a teaching. Wait a minute, I didn't know that we believe this about salvation. That's the way it goes? I didn't know that we believe this about whatever. And every once in a while I share some of these things with people, and they're like, okay, hold up. Let's look a little bit more into this whole situation now, just because like, whatever I thought I knew as a baby, like St. Paul one time said, when I was a child, I spoke like a child. But when I became a man, I became a grown-up, I put away childish things. In Hebrews, he talks about the fact of us having baby food and then us having grown food. And Christ is offering to us grown food. And I'm not. Like, I don't know if this is boring. I'll be boring to you. Not boring to me. So I'm enjoying it. But I don't want to baby you. I can come tell you guys something. Here's a cool story. I have like a lot of cool mission stories. I can tell you funny mission stories. Tell you entertaining funny stories about missions. But I wanted to maybe give you something that's not babying you. Not say the other stuff is babying you. But to maybe look at ourselves and say, how can I challenge myself with this stuff? And one of the ways to measure even the way you're challenging yourself, the church fathers talk about this idea of the spiritual rule. John and I talk about this. In your spiritual life, say if you're an athlete training or something, say if you're going to be a baller, you're going to be a basketball legend, or cricket, or whatever you guys play. If you're going to be a pro, okay, so that was a racial thing. Not to point out the obvious. Just kidding. If you're going to be a pro, you're going to measure a way that you discipline yourself, aren't you? Or you're just going to show up one day to the gym and be like, I'm going to shoot around a little bit, and hopefully I become really good. Right? But in the spiritual life, you kind of think about, we're doing that same thing. We're kind of like ringing it. We're like, I don't know, I'm going to read a little bit. Hopefully I become mad holy. Like, I don't know. The idea of a spiritual rule or the spiritual discipline in my life is like, do I have some kind of discipline that says, this is my daily bread of Bible. This is my daily bread of prayer. This is my daily bread of service. This is my daily bread of time with God. Minimum. Otherwise, I'm not eating. If I'm not eating, it's no wonder that I'm dying. Make sense so far? Okay. Going to the last principle I want to share. Maybe we could take a look as well. Any questions so far? I was expecting some. If you turn to the Matthew version of it, from Matthew 17. Looking at the Matthew, or looking at the Mark from Mark now. You see a question that isn't answered. If I was to ask you, what are they talking about? What's the topic of conversation that's so hot that you got a dead guy coming back in Moses, and you got a guy that's not dead at all coming back in Elijah? Anybody know what they're talking about? Could be. It's actually answered. I just wanted you to skim through at least the Matthew and Mark. It's actually answered in the Luke. In the Luke Gospel, it talks about that they were discussing the decease that's about to happen. Because a big thing that you see, it's common in all three Gospels, is the follow-up. Like, what's the follow-through? Okay, so now we saw, and now the picture of Jesus is blown in my mind. It's blown in that I used to think he's ordinary, but now I'm seeing, boom, he's, wow, transfigured, big deal. He's shining. Wow, that's big stuff. What do I do now? After seeing what they're talking about, and that really blew me away as well. You see the reaction in all three Gospels that they said, let's just hang out here and build them 3 temples. Right? Did you notice that reaction? So like, God, this is great. What a great opportunity, Jesus, that you allowed us to be here. We're going to hang out here, and we're going to build you a church. And build a church of St. Peter. Build a church of St. Peter, sorry. Like St. Elijah, St. Moses. And this will be wonderful. And if you pause here for a second, this could be one of the easiest traps for us as Orthodox people. Is when you've got a great experience with God, whether it's a great meeting or a great time in the Bible or great anything, figure, it's the best. This is good. I'm going to hang out here. Like, maybe even here in OCC, there's a good system here. Come every couple weeks or whatever, do a talk. It's great. This will be our thing. You notice that Jesus didn't say to them, didn't respond at all. He didn't say like, he didn't even acknowledge that the request was so funny, is that he didn't even respond. Because in the story at the end, after that, in all 3 of those things, there's a dude outside who's an epileptic waiting to be healed. And now that's the crux. Not the crux, but the second, I guess, crux of our conversation. Say you get to the point, say you have check mark for the first thing, and you're really motivated spiritually, and you make a spiritual move, and you're praying every day, and you're reading every day, and you're really seeing Christ differently in a new light. Then now you want to just build them a little altar in your room and call it a day. And Jesus tells you, that's not really the idea. Not really the idea because of this. Do you know at the end of the liturgy, the dismissal part, that says the benediction part, that says go in peace, after you say the blessing, God the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit and so on, the gift and fellowship, the communion of the Holy Spirit, go in peace. When God says go, where do you think He's trying to tell you to go? Tell you how I usually interpret that is go have lunch. Right? Like go to the cafeteria. Go home. Take a nap. It's been a long day, long liturgy sermon. Right? I mean, have anybody interpret that differently? Like, let me know. Anybody still awake? Anybody alive? Okay. All right. It's much easier to speak to a dead crowd. So, no, I'm just kidding. So, you can interpret that and say, well, the usual. Okay, now go home. Well, the church fathers are always talking about, both in the Mount Tabor kind of transfiguration experience, and in the liturgical experience, and in any spiritual experience at all whatsoever, it is a mountaintop. You know what happens when you just chill at a mountaintop? Remember the story with our dude Moses, who showed up here? Remember Moses showed up on a mountaintop, hung out there, chilling with God for a long time, got the law of God, his face was shining, his toes were shining, it was a great time. He came down, saw the people worshiping a cattle statue. Sometimes for us, if all we're doing is this, so let me give you an example. So, I don't know if you watch sports, but right now, New York Knicks are undefeated. Glory be to the Holy Trinity for that. If we manage to get tickets to the next Knicks game, okay, we're going to watch Melo and all these guys do big. Sorry for I don't know if females in the audience know what I'm talking about. You guys follow basketball? Okay, imagine there's a sports team somewhere, just for the sake of, time. Just kidding. She said no. No, I remember something like, you don't know? Imagine now we just get the Madison Square Garden, we're going to go watch gifted group of individuals play basketball at the highest level. We show up, and then they get into a huddle and they do a little motivational thing together. And yeah, we're waiting for the game to start, very good. And then 20 minutes later, they're still in the huddle. They're jumping around, one guy's in the middle, really inspiring the rest of them. It's awesome stuff, okay? And then like the coach comes into the huddle, does like a backflip to really inspire them. And so far it's amazing. It's an hour later now to the game. And then say, all right guys, like we're done here, and now we're gonna go home. Any problems with the picture?
It's awesome.
It's awesome, for sure, because you definitely would want to see teams huddle. One of the problems with us in our Christianity is that we huddle a lot. We're a great basketball team, or a football team, or a soccer team, or foosball, whatever. God has given us the ability to be a great team. But if all we do, and that's why if you notice, like, I'm sorry to make fun of you a little bit when you were like tired or bored. I'll be tired and bored of this too. This is all we do. Just sit there and get talked at. If you're not bored at it, like, it's about time to be bored at it. But the thing is, what do we do with being bored at? What do we do with being bored at the huddle? Okay, yeah, wow, God is mind-blowing. Sick. Amazing. I mean, glory to God. Wonderful. We gotta play the game. Right? If we're not playing the game, or the church fathers, like, the contemporary ones anyway, like they termed the idea of like going from liturgy to liturgy. That doesn't mean you can't physically do that, because you're not allowed to like pray liturgy and then we'll take communion again like right away. There's like a 9-hour rule or something, right? They're not talking about that. They're talking about a liturgy where you have the Eucharist, then there's a liturgy of another kind. A liturgy of your life. Your life is supposed to be somehow something liturgical. Your life is supposed to be something where you're going up to this Mount Tabor. Tabor, by the way, translated to like the core of the earth. Because this thing is such a central part of our Christian existence. The idea of us going with Jesus, grabbing something spectacular that no one else in the world knows or has or believes or can understand. Nothing. And then us going and sharing with the world and saying, check it out. Mount Tabor situation. Christ glistening. Christ in glory. Christ dying for you. The whole bit. That whole bit becomes more and more boring when we're sharing it with each other. And you know there's a mission pitch just coming. I know, like it's just this is what I do. But doesn't that make sense though? Doesn't that make sense in your own spiritual life? Why maybe things are a little bit more boring than they should be? Is if there's no outflow of the things that you're getting. If you're just going up a mountaintop and then hanging out on a mountaintop, you're just gonna go to Nikon's roof and just hang out at Nikon's roof. If Dave just goes to the hospital there, sees what he can become, and then leaves med school, God forbid. See what I'm saying? This concept, and doesn't get, the practicality of the how is easy. It's just a matter of are we willing to do it? Are we willing to, once we have a secure, we're working on our inner life. We're working on grabbing the stuff from the mountain. Do we understand the full picture? Or are we still inventing a picture of ourselves, a picture of this transfiguration thing, that it's for the three guys to go home and blog about, or write in their journal. Hey, today I saw Jesus transfigured. Oh wow, that's amazing. Because I'll tell you a little spiritual principle. You may or may not like this, but I'm sorry. God will often limit what He will reveal to you if you limit what He will reveal to others. I didn't invent this. You see it clearly in the Bible. Any prophet, anybody receiving from God, says to God, all right, God, I'm going to just hold on to this. I'm going to just chill right here in my house. God says, okay. I'm not telling you anything anymore. Jeremiah would even say, I tried to take back your word and to hold it inside, but I couldn't. It was inside me like a burning flame. And I had to share it with other people. And the other principle that you may not like that's also part of this is that the part of receiving from God, a lot of revelation, and by revelation I just mean His true face, who Christ really is. It may not be for everybody, but the only way it's not for everybody is if we disqualify ourselves. The only way it's not for everyone is if we disqualify ourselves. Is if we deem ourselves unworthy and we say, you know what? That's cool. I'm sure God's offering me a whole ton of stuff. I'm sure He's offering me something great. I'm sure He's offering me to be a saint and stuff, but like, I'm cool just being at the bottom of the barrel. But God's real desire is not that at all. God's desire is to invite all of us to see Him as He really is, and then to show us who we really can be. See what I'm saying? And then that should move us in a lot of different ways. It should move us personally, it should move us as a community, and it should move us to care about the rest. Like I mentioned Kelly, Dr. Kelly, Professor Kelly, the great. To even care about him and his class. I don't know if any of you guys have had him yet. He's a great ethics student. Does that make sense? No? Blank stare makes just good. I mean, you don't have to worry about it. Okay, you know, Luke, why don't you press the right button real quick?